everyone, and welcome to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me, as always, is Tara.
Greetings, citizens.
This is a science fiction movie podcast. Every week we get together, we talk about science fiction films. We're doing a special 70s sci-fi block, and this movie that we're going to talk about today is A Boy and His Dog from 1975. We will start spoiler-free, as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get any spoilers, and we'll go from there. So this is a story based on a novella by Harlan Ellison, if I say his name right, who was a big science fiction writer during his time. Oh, Tara disappeared. What's interesting is that I've heard Harlan Ellison's name pop up a number of times over the years without ever actually reading anything he's ever done. Mainly, you know, I know he was the writer on a video game, an old PC game called I Have No Mouth But I Must Scream, which was always, I never played it, but it always sounded really intriguing and weird. I know that he had ideas that were so similar to Terminator that in the credits for Terminator, there's actually like not a credit for him, but it actually comes up saying, "We acknowledge the works of Harlan Ellison." Right?
Interesting.
Right? They legally had to put that in there to sort of like just sort of settle.
Yeah, because Cameron claims it came from a dream or something, right?
Yeah. He talked about how he had this vision of the machine rising from fire, and he just sort of built everything around that. But it just so happened that it kind of lined up with some stuff that Harlan had done. But so this is based on his novella, and he was actually originally going to write the script for this as well, but it ended up not happening because I don't know if it was taking too long or if it was just a case of the director just wanted to step in and do it. But this is a post-apocalyptic story set in the... I mean, when it was made, it was a very distant future of 2024. Now that's actually quite soon. That came up at the start, and I'm like, oh... That's only 4 years away.
Oh,
jeez.
Hope you're ready for World War IV.
Yeah, the movie starts...
5 days.
Yeah, the movie starts with a really big, bold statement. It just says, World War IV lasted 5 days, which I actually really like that line, because it goes like... Because so many movies will mention World War III to say, hey, we're in the future. I think there's something just really interesting about saying, no, World War IV. Like, there was another one first, and then we got this one. And that's where all the nukes happened, and we're in the shithole we're in now. But it's supposed to apocalyptic story, obviously, about a character named Vic who's got a dog. Notably, though, the dog has telepathy and talks to Vic, and we hear the dog talking to him, and that's a big part of the movie. And Vic is played by a young Don Johnson, who I did not recognize at all. When I saw his name, I went, oh wait, the same as the guy who was in Watchmen just like last year.
Poor Judd is dead.
And sure enough, it's him. This is a very interesting film. It's a very quirky movie in what it's doing. Very unique. 70s once again giving us the weirder take on... It's almost like the 70s were this weird experimental time before we kind of settled into what we actually think of as like mainstream science fiction. Like, there was no mainstream science fiction yet. I guess Star Wars was kind of the start of that in a lot of ways, but like
I think so.
It's all these weird edgy takes on science fiction, and this movie has got an edgy kind of thing. And one of the bits of trivia that I read actually just after I watched the movie today, because I'd seen this once before you had, and this was a first time watch for you,
I've seen this before. I didn't really remember a lot of it, but yeah, I've seen it. Okay,
fair enough. I thought it was the first time watch, but this is one of the few movies in history where the director went to the MPAA and requested a higher rating, because the MPAA were going to give this a G. And
no way.
And he went
Did they just read the title and assume it was a Disney movie?
And he was like, hey, wait a minute. There's like sexual assault
rape and a lot of nudity. Murder. Lots of blood. Yeah,
we've been joking through these 70s movies how they all have unnecessary boobs, and most of them even have the bush, the 70s bush. And this one, in fact, does have that. So yeah, it's so weird.
God bless the 70s.
But yeah.
I'm telling you that I think Hollywood was just a coiled spring because of the Hays Code. And that is a cautionary tale as to why you shouldn't shelter your children. Because when you release them into the world, they give you A Boy and His Dog and Texas Chainsaw Massacre and AIs having sex with women in their trapped homes. And
I think you've brought the Hays Code in every single one of these reviews.
It has to be the reason, though.
I mean, you're probably right, but I'm just, you've brought it up every single time. It's just kind of funny. It's almost like a staple of these 70 reviews now. Like, it's going to be weird when we get to one of you.
Because it ended in 1968.
Yeah.
And like the 70s came around and we're just like, boobs. Here you go, world.
Yeah. Also, everyone's depressed about Vietnam. I feel like it was like a.
Oh yeah, that's like a courtesy thing then for the boys fighting overseas.
So
something for the troops.
So here's the weird part of all on the fact that there's a telepathic dog, which obviously is weird in and of itself. But the sort of weird thing from a conceptual point of view for the characters is that the movie opens and we meet Vic, and he hears like a woman screaming, and there's like this gang of men who have clearly just raped her, and he runs in, and the movie plays like in most movies this would be, this is our hero who's hearing someone in distress and is going to go save them. And when he finds her dead, when this is the opening of the movie, so we're not in spoilers, this is just the opening. He finds her dead, and his line is something along the lines of, "Oh, what a waste! She could have been used 3 or 4 more times before we had to, kill her." And what? What?
Yeah, it's coming from like a kid who's saying it.
Yeah, he's
so
like
brutal.
Yeah, he's like 17 or whatever, and it's
give it a G rating. Are you sure it was a G rating?
Yeah, it was a G. Because I reacted.
So they didn't
to
even watch like the first minute of the movie.
Apparently not. Maybe the attitude towards rape was just really weird and different in 1975. It had to have been.
Well, Hollywood just got rid of the Hays Code. Just kidding.
I feel like I'm going to start putting that at the end of the music in every episode. Just, Hollywood get just rid of the Hays Code. So right away it gives you this character that you're like, okay, I don't know if I care about this character all of a sudden, because I mean it's kind of hard to get behind someone with this attitude. I mean, because then it becomes the premise of the movie is that the dog's hungry and wants food. He also wants food, of course, but the dog can sniff out women, so he sniffs out women in return for being fed. And that is the movie. He wants to have sex. He wants to find someone, and he's not really concerned about it being consensual. I mean, if that previous line wasn't an indication. So that's our character. That's our quotation marks here, our hero of the film.
That's our protagonist.
Yes. So really weird sort of thing to start with, and then from there it's like, is it about him sort of learning and becoming better? Is it about him getting his comeuppance? Honestly, the messaging by the end of this movie is so murky to me. I'm not entirely sure exactly what it's saying. So that's something I think we'll have some interesting conversations about. But that's the gist of the movie. I'll just leave it there for now. We'll get into the rest in spoilers. Tara, did you enjoy A Boy and His Dog?
It's kind of a complicated one. I don't really like our main guy very much, and I don't even really like the dog all that much because the dog's kind of an asshole too. Mm-hmm. But I think overall I'm pro this movie, but not very much. It gets me by the end.
Sure, yeah. It's kind of an interest. It's a quirky, edgy, sort of dark comedy sci-fi almost. It's definitely satirical, because it's definitely meant to be satirical. Is the movie?
Sure. It has a lot of Clockwork Orange in it, I think.
Yeah, I can see that. It's just got. I feel like it's saying a lot about human beings treat each other and how put into this worst case scenario, just how bad, just how awful we're going to be to each other. Which I guess is a lot of characters in post-apocalyptic stories. Usually,
I do think that's the main point of the movie. It's just that if you take away all of humanity and you just leave us with the bare bones of us going back to being animals and animalistic, that this is not the future that we need to avoid by avoiding World War IV.
Yes. And usually, of course, what we do here is we have a couple of characters, usually at least the protagonist, will be better and will try to be better in the face of everyone else being awful, and we'll do something with that. This movie and this story is not interested in that. This story is unrelenting in how it just presents even the main characters as kind of scumbags, and it's like, this is just how it is. And even when we get different types of characters who theoretically should be more reminiscent of what we expect from people, there's almost at the other end of the spectrum equally cruel. It's this kind of just people are terrible of a message.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that Harlan Ellison is kind of just from the stories I've heard of he's done. From I Have No Mouth, because I Have No Mouth by Emma Scream is also set in a post-apocalyptic future where there's only like 4 or 5 people left living, and they are being held captive by an evil artificial intelligence who is just like toying with them. Like, it's just insane, but it's like really dark and depressing, and like that is his kind of like thing. Is he does these really just kind of like pulling no punches science fiction stories.
I wonder if I read any of his stuff.
You may have done. Please
I'm trying to look him up right now. I haven't really read a lot of sci-fi, to be honest, though.
I mean, I guess some of the things we'll talk about. I think it's impossible not to talk about this and not even bring up kind of, because remember, this predates any of the Mad Max movies, and I think it's worth mentioning that the way that this is presented is kind of the wasteland and like just little parts of civilization, like these little sort of shanty put together like areas.
Yeah, and clearly the Fallout video games were inspired by this movie. I mean, even the dog, like he calls him dog meat, and I know that's the name of the dog in Fallout 4. I've never played it, but
yeah. And George.
Oh, you know what he wrote?
Oh.
We have to bring this up. He wrote the Star Trek episode "City at the Edge of Forever."
Of course.
City on the Edge of Forever.
Yeah, I knew that. I had forgotten, but I knew that. Yeah, me and Connor talked about it. Yeah. There's even a comic book out there that's based on the original script that has the differences from the original script that he wrote to the episode that was actually filmed. So that's a popular one.
Probably the best episode of the original series. Maybe not my favorite, but like probably the best one.
It's up there. I think it's top 5 for sure, I'd say.
I mean, it's no Doomsday Machine, and there aren't any triples, but pretty close.
I love Doomsday Machine. You're going to get arguments over for me about Doomsday Machine.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have this sort of wasteland, and George Miller, who made the Mad Max movies, it's kind of admitted that like a boy. What was the quote I read earlier today? It was like, "A Boy and His Dog is the more intelligent movie, but I made the fun movie, so I made a lot more money," or something like that. He said, and that's really interesting. And
so he really like set the bar of what these types of movies are going to look like.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of like what I think of as like these wasteland post-apocalyptic movies in this film.
I mean, even when you watch the first Mad Max, it looks like it's trying to go for this, but it doesn't quite have the resources to do it.
It's not until Road Warrior where it kind of actually feels like it. Yeah. I like I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, as much as there's a lot of effort put into this, at the same time, it does feel a little bit like the terrain they're in, because they're shooting like somewhere in California, in the desert. It looks a little bit bland compared to like I'm thinking Road Warrior has more interesting visuals, even though it is still technically a wasteland, which is these shanty things put together. But it has that look. It is genuinely one of those movies. The cast are fine. They're interesting. I think the sound of the dog is intriguing as well, because it sounds like he's talking over like a walkie-talkie. It's got kind of like a transmission sort of sound to it, but nothing that's like annoying or anything like that. And I'm thinking of Alphaville here when I'm saying, because
and I'm glad they didn't try to like, I don't know, make the dog's mouth move or anything.
It's interesting because I don't know why I read so much trivia about this today, but this is actually something that also came up in all this. Is apparently Harlan Ellison was in discussion with multiple studios who wanted to make this into a movie from his story, and one studio in particular, I don't know if he said which studio it was, but they offered him a lot of money, and they started talking about how they were going to try and animate the dog's mouth moving, and Ellison just sort of declined the money and left right there because
what?
No.
Oh, that's crazy.
So no, it's purely telepathic, which I think was the right choice.
I think so too. Yeah.
That's good.
Silly.
And even that choice in and of itself, this idea that the dog like can telepathically communicate, like it's, you know, like society's completely broken down, but there's still this bond between man and dog. You know, it's that even though it's kind of like a weird like deal because they both want something from each other as opposed to like a friendship, because it never feels like a friendship, not really. It's
And the dog's character is interesting because he seems educated.
Oh yeah, he knows the
It's
history.
like the dog is more human than the humans are.
Yeah, he knows the history of everything. He tells them about how World War III was happening and what happened at World War IV. Because Vic doesn't know his parents, so he's learned things from Blood, the dog. That's the dog's name. So
Yeah.
it's such a thing, and like the plot's actually really simple. There's not much to talk about before we get to spoilers, because like, you know, it establishes the first 30-40 minutes of just like setting up what the world is like, what he wants. And then once he actually finds a woman, and that's just kind of the catalyst for what happens for the rest of the story. It's all really simple from there. It's just kind of, you know, A to B to C, and there you go. That's it, kind of done. But it does raise a lot of interesting mythology questions and ideas as it goes. Most of what we're going to talk about probably though is just kind of what this is saying about human beings, and what Vic being this awful, what that means, what Blood being this awful means, what other characters being as awful as they are means, and so on and so on.
I will say, like, I do feel bad for the dog watching the movie, like the actual dog actor.
Oh, sure.
Who had to sit there and be yelled at constantly, or fight another dog, which looked really brutal. And I don't know, like there were times where it like really bothered me to watch.
That's fair. From the sounds of it, the dog was like really like a good performer on set. And although the one thing they said that he didn't like was they had to put in like fake teeth to make him look more vicious during the fight. They gave him like these big fake teeth to make him look like more more growly. And apparently the dog hated that, but otherwise was happy enough, I think, from the sounds of it.
I hope so. And they had that scene where he has to sit on a stool in front of a big bin of popcorn and not be given any popcorn. I mean, my dog would have committed suicide.
Oh dear. But he respects that it needs to be paid for. He respects that it has to be purchased. He's not, you know, he's not a bad dog. He understands.
He's a good dog.
Well, he's a good dog until he's saying, "Let's ditch the broad. Let's give her to the bad guys so we can get away."
He's a dog. He doesn't know about love. He only knows about love between a boy and his dog.
Yeah, I don't think what Vic has with the woman is what I'd call love.
The movie tries to make you think that, I think, for a little bit.
Maybe there's meant to be the inkling that maybe they're starting to feel something, but I don't think they ever actually do. And even later on, when the word is brought up, it feels more like a naive kind of thing coming from one person as opposed to actual love. But I mean, sure. Anyway, so I guess we'll give the spoiler warning so we can dive in and talk about what goes on in this movie. As I said, there's the opening scene. Well, the opening is actually lots of nuclear explosions, which.
You want to do the plugs first?
The plugs? Oh, you're right, of course. See, this is why Tara's the co-host. This is why she's here, and why...
I'm like the dog. Soon I'll be teaching you history of... I don't know. I don't know any history.
So yes, thank you to our Patreon producers for the month. Well, at least the time of recording anyway. Thank you to David Short, Alison M. Fordyce, Cindy Palacios... Tyler Hess. I was getting more training for that yesterday, and apparently I was getting close, but I feel like I'm forgetting it every time I leave. Every time I stop the live stream, it's out of my head. So when one ear and out the other. But yeah, so they're all patrons at the $20 and up tiers, but you don't have to be a $20 and up tier, do they, Tara?
Why no? You can check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/SmileFuzzTV and donate as low as $1 per month, and that will get you bonus episodes of The Ace. You can check out our back catalog of the Transfer Saga and Time Cop, other movies. Lots of we're trying to go for a David Carradine thing for a little while here, so check those out.
Yeah, we literally just did Future Force. At the time of recording this, we just recorded Future Force, so
Yeah,
Yes.
but expect more.
Expect more. We've got at least one more we're definitely doing that we discovered. So
Once again.
as Tara freezes. So yeah, go to Patreon. That comes to Fuzz TV. But anyway, that is onto spoilers then. So the movie that opens with all these nuclear explosions, and apparently they added this in later because they just wanted to make it clear that this was post-apocalyptic, that this was after a nuclear war.
Got it.
Even though I thought the text was pretty clear in what it said.
Yeah.
But I mean, whatever. Like, people need some visuals sometimes to really hit it home. And after the incident with where they find the dead girl, there's like a whole sequence where, and I thought this was going to be more of a thing later. I mean, I guess it's only just to establish that later they can't go back to the little town they frequent. But like, there's like a guy in like a sort of big cart thing. He's got like henchmen, and they steal some food from him. And nothing really ever happens with him after that. It's just kind of. I mean,
but you're right. They do imply that they'll meet again in some way. Yeah. Because the guy kind of has like respect for him, and it's like he would make a great member of my team or whatever. He's like, come around anytime.
But it does something like that. It genuinely feels like a prototype for like the gang and like the Road Warrior in Mad Max 2. Like it. Or any band of raiders in any post-apocalyptic thing ever.
Yeah, you're right. He's got like a bunch of people who all came from different places, and he's like really decorative in his outfit. Like, he gets the prettiest things that they find.
I'm fairly certain this guy is the inspiration for Dennis Hopper's performance in Waterworld.
Another great post-apocalyptic movie.
Great. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure about the word great there. I think I take umbrage with that. And the sad part is it's science fiction, so we are going to have to do it at some point. And
all right.
The thought of having to watch that again is not something.
It's got a good score.
Thrills me.
Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah. Although we'll be doing the short theatrical cut. Thank you very much. There's no way I'm agreeing to the extended one.
I didn't even know there was.
Oh, there's an extended one. Yep.
We will be doing. Oh, shoot. We will be searching for dry land together.
Yes. So we see they have like a little like movie theater night, and they're basically just watching like really weird old 70s porn.
Like weird snuff films. They're all really rapey.
Yeah. Which I guess makes sense given the attitude of like all the men in this movie. Yeah. And the dog like senses a woman. He's like, "There's a woman nearby. I can sniff her out." He's like, "Oh, don't be silly. There's not a woman here. Like some of these other dogs would have smelled her." He's like, "No, she's here. She's." And so he's like, and there's a sort of running thing in the first chunk of the movie where Vic at first will tell the dog he's full of shit, and then he'll get so desperate that he'll eventually say, "Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you know better than I do. Okay, all right. Point me in the right direction, and I'll get you some food. Like, come on. Point me in the direction of the woman. Come on." I say the woman. They actually say a female. They keep saying a female in a really kind of like sort of. It's a really dehumanizing way of talking about someone. We have to find a female, kind of thing. So, but eventually he does find her. They end up in a sort of underground sort of area. At least like what looked like it was once like a shelter. Maybe when the bombs first started falling, it was like a sort of there was like a medical area and lots of beds and stuff like that. And there's a whole sequence where he's watching her kind of like get dressed because she was naked for some reason down here. I don't know why.
She was naked and then getting dressed real slow.
Real slow. Full frontal as you would expect in a 70s movie. Gotta get that G rating. And of course he runs out with his gun and just kind of like, what is it he says? He says, you've got two options, right? If you try to run, I'm going to shoot you in the leg, and you're still going to get it, but you'll also be shot in the leg. So again, not exactly a hero worth rooting for.
Yeah, and also he had a line earlier after the whole like she was good for 2 or 3 more goes or whatever. He had another line about how he really needed to find a female because he hadn't been with one in like 6 weeks. And you're like, oh, So he's done this before. This isn't like
So
he's supercharged and like ready to go.
You could have almost built like a sort of thing if this was his first time, like he's just gotten to that age.
A little bit of innocence behind it.
Yeah.
He just doesn't know this is how he thinks he's supposed to do it, and he can learn. Like once he would meet one face to face and see that she's a person, then he would be like, "Oh no, I feel things."
Yeah.
Nope.
I feel like it kind of plays the look. It might be his first time when it actually happens, though. But then again, it could just be the way she sort of responds to him as new, as opposed to the actual act itself. Because she responds in a very interesting way. After they have a whole sequence where they like these bad guys show. I assume this is I suppose this is the bad gang showing up again. I never really thought about it this way because you don't really see the leader again, I don't think. But I thought it was just a lot of bad guys showing up because they were aware she was there and they were looking for her. We get like a little bit of a sequence. This is where the dog fights the other dog, and they're running from around all the beds and all the rest of it. And so it's a bit of an action sequence, and they get away. The dog does get bloodied up, which, I mean, don't feel too bad. It's just some red shit poured on the dog.
Yeah, it's like red food coloring on the dog.
But he's fine. He's put in his effort. He sort of initiates sex, and she kind of just goes along with it. And afterwards, she's kind of like, "Hey, that was fun. Do you want to do it again?" He's like, "You want to do it again? I might want to do it again. Would you want to do it again?" And it kind of like fades away. And it's all. This is purely a comedy beat because it cuts to Blood the dog, who's just like, "All right, I'll just go to sleep." And because they're going at it, his like entire like bed shaking, and he's trying to ignore it, and he's trying to like pretend to be asleep. And
poor doggy.
Yeah, it's basically just a montage of the dog like trying to sleep, throughout the night as this is happening.
This happens like there's a shootout, and then there's like green lights that they see overhead or something, and then they have to hide from the green lights.
Yeah, we have to talk.
Are those mutants?
Yeah, we have to talk about this. That's because this never comes back up again. Like, because basically the reason why they win the fight essentially and are able to like sort of sneak around the bad guys and they get the upper hand is because they make a noise.
Call them screamers, right?
Yeah, they make a noise. Like if we make a noise that sounds like screamers, they'll get scared and they'll take their mind off us. And we actually, after the fight, there's real screamers who go by. We don't get to see them. We see like a green light, as you said, coming through like the grate or whatever up top, and we hear the noise. So it's implying, I mean, maybe it's mutants, maybe robots. Like I don't know. But it never comes up again. It's one of these things where it feels like it fits into this post-apocalyptic sci-fi world that we see in other movies and stories and TV shows, but this movie just
it was probably in the short story, but they it wasn't filmable at the time or for the budget or whatever, so they put it in there, but they didn't show anything for that reason.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I'd forgotten about it because it was such a standalone little thing that never really,
yeah, it was really bizarre because I was trying to figure out what it was since they didn't show. I'm like, what just happened?
yeah. But after they've had sex, she's like, "Hey, since we're really into each other now,
let's ditch the dog."
Yeah. But no, don't get me wrong. Her being so into this when he essentially forced her at gunpoint is a little bit murky, but it does actually make a lot of sense later on when we find out her sort of she's got a motive here. So it does make more sense later. Basically,
it's not just she's like giving herself over. Like, oh, first you try to rape me, now I love you. It's not like that.
And that's the weird thing is that her attitude before this isn't really, I mean, again, it makes more sense later, but like she doesn't feel like she belongs in this world at first. She doesn't realize she's in a world where every man's going to rape every woman they see. Like she's just sort of so like she's confused. Like, oh, this is why this? What's happening? Like, where are you living? Now, again, it makes more sense later because she is living in a different society and so on and so on. But it just it plays really weird at first. She like she doesn't feel like she belongs. But she's like, hey, I live underground. We find that there's these underground cities. This is where a lot of people went when this all happened, and they actually have like ecosystems. They have like proper places to live, all that kind of stuff. And she's from this society, and she wants him to go with her. And he's like, no, I can't leave Blood because Blood's not allowed to go. But ultimately, he agrees to go to what's he agrees to go for? Because he doesn't plan on staying. He just wants to go down and get something.
Food.
Yeah, food probably. Yeah, I think it's probably food. But You know, because I was supposed to mention at this point we're like halfway
I
through the
thought
movie at
maybe
this
he
point.
was going after her. Is that not? Because he knows that she goes down there. She hits him with the flashlight and knocks him out.
That's true.
And
Yeah, you're
runs
right.
off. And we assume that she goes back into, I don't know if they call this, they call it the underground. Is that right? And the place that they're in before, they called a vault.
Yes. No, you're right. She hits him over the head after he's not agreeing to go down, and I guess kind of open this way. Like, is he up running after for revenge? Is he running after because he is got feelings for her? Because at one point, before this happens, after the sex, Blood kind of says, "I want to talk to you" in the other room. So they go to another room, and Blood's like, "Okay, let's ditch her." Because it's worth mentioning again, when the bad guys showed up before the shootout, Blood was like, "Okay, give them the girl, right? They won't care about us if we just give them the girl." But here again, he's like, "Let's ditch her now. She's going to like, she's in the way now." And he's like, "No, I can keep using her for a while." Like, it's just, because he's like, "You've had your fix." Like, yeah, and I want to have my fix again. Like that's his attitude.
Yeah, she's got the go for it attitude. Like maybe she would be fine.
Yeah. So, and that's so.
Women are a rare commodity, especially young, attractive ones. So.
Well, I mean, if we're analyzing the movie, that's how it treats women. It treats them as like a resource, essentially. Like it's another thing in the world.
There's shelter, and there's vagina.
Yes, there's vagina.
That's it.
Yes, all the things a growing boy needs. So we're halfway through the movie at this point, and then he goes down into this underground sort of place, and there's some industrial area. He gets caught, and then we get to the weird part of this, where this society underground, they all have their faces painted white with the red cheeks. That they have this kind of like old school.
I really liked it.
Yeah,
I like the look of it a lot. This is where the movie like really started to win me over, with this underground society. The whole like, it reminded me of like I don't want to say like pre-Victorian era, where like men wore lots of like the pale makeup and stuff like that, where it's just a fashion, but it looks so ridiculous. It makes me want to wash my face with my makeup. It makes me look at it and go, man, makeup is dumb.
Yeah, so and actually what this reminds me of, forgetting the fact that it's underground, although sometimes this would happen underground, is again it reminds me of like it feels like a precursor to the trope of the crazy town you find in a post-apocalyptic thing, where all the people are part of like what feels like some sort of weird cult, and they're all like and what we find out here is that this underground society is controlled by a group called the Committee, and they are very strict. They send when people have done something wrong, they send them to the farm.
The farm,
which I can only assume involves processing their body parts for things. And so here's the thing. So we find out that the woman here, whose name I've not even mentioned because I've forgotten. I'll just check her name. Quilla. So Quilla, it turns out, is the daughter of like one of the leaders of this committee, and she actually was sent up top to lure him in, which is really weird when you think about it. That this man said, right, go up and seduce this ruffian that we've had our eye on, and lure him down here. And why did they want to lure him down here, you might ask? Well, because this is actually really similar to an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation that I just watched recently, bizarrely. But basically, they don't have enough.
Is it the children one?
They don't have enough of the gene pool, right? They don't have enough genes, and they need, every so often they need some new DNA.
So they need Wesley Crusher.
Yeah, and this is the thing, like his attitude when he hears this, Vic, because they dress him up in like dungarees, and he's like, oh, he's got like a farmer's hat on and whatever, and he's like, nah, let me out here, you pieces of shit, or whatever. And when he hears like, no, you want me to knock everyone up? All right, I'll start with her. Line them up. Like, he's ready to go. He's like,
he's so excited.
He's like, yeah, I can do this. But the
I'll be your savior. Hell yeah.
But the comedy twist.
I love his performance.
But the comedy twist to this is that it cuts to him in like an operating table, and he's gagged and bound. And what's actually happening is that he's not getting to have sex with anyone. They're just taking his semen, and they're not only are they impregnating women with his semen. Every single woman who's going to get his semen gets technically married to him before they do it.
They're all in their wedding dresses, lined up outside of his booth.
There's like a little, there's a little altar set up in front of the hospital bed, and there's like a priest standing there. It's just his performance ceremonies.
And all we see is like he's strapped to like a table, and there's a blanket covering it, but we see this white fluid coming from a tube underneath. Ew. Ew. We do that to cattle, by the way.
Yeah.
It's gross.
It looked a bit. I don't want to critique the sperm here, but it looked a bit in the thin side to my eye. But I mean, whatever.
Well, maybe they're watering it down.
Yeah, maybe. It legitimately looked like they were just
preserve it.
It looked like they were using milk, is what I'm saying. It looked like they were just pouring milk into it like a test tube. Like at this point in the movie, the first time I watched it, my line of thinking here was that, okay, I get this. This is a movie about his comeuppance. This is a cruel irony that up top he viewed women as just there to service his needs. They were just things. And the ironic twist
he's
here,
being used.
yeah, the ironic twist here is he's just being used for what he has, and
he doesn't have any pleasure out of it. It's just we're taking what we need.
Yep, and they're going to use them for 35 women and then put them in the farm. So, like, anyway, like, okay, all right, and this would be fine, except that these people, the committee, also feel that they're crazy, and like the daughter, Quilla, actually rescues him because she didn't bring him down here for their plan. She wanted to use him to kill the committee because she wants to do an uprising and like take over because she doesn't agree with them.
Yep.
And I'm like, is anyone in this movie likable? Is anyone in this movie like, you know, remotely like worth rooting for? Because it doesn't feel like it.
Even the dog's an asshole.
Like no one is likable. And then the henchman dude that works for the committee, who we see like in the previous scenes,
who's like a bullet sponge.
Oh, he's a robot.
Yeah.
When he eventually goes down, there's like sparks and stuff coming from behind him, because the uprising is going to happen like because they've got like a little field underground, and the robot henchman actually kills like her two partners who were part of the uprising, so they just kind of have to run. But they shoot the robot down first, and we see it spark, and then they get up top, and the dog had to wait outside. And so there's a moment where does the dog still here? Like, is it okay? And Blood's like fine, but he's kind of starving because he's been there for like 2 days and not had anything to eat. And Vic's like, oh, we have to get you food, we have to get you to the hospital right now. And at this point, Quilla's like, look, it's too late for him, but I'm in love with you, and we can go and, you know, make it together. Because the dog earlier was talking about up and over the hill. He's basically talking about the promised land, but there's still a place where stuff can grow. There's still farming. There's still... Because I did like that line earlier on, because when he's describing this and Vic says, oh yeah, where food can just come from the ground. Like, he just sort of says it like that. It's so ridiculous. Like, it was a nice touch. It's a nice touch. I would describe this bizarrely as an ending kind of in a similar vein to Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. And if anyone has seen that movie, you'll get why I'm saying that. Because
I'm not.
Because she says, okay, I love you. I wanted, you know, be there for you. And he sort of stares at her, and it fades to black. And so the last thing we heard before it faded to black was that the dog was done. There was nothing they could do for him. And she's saying, I love you, let's go and be together. I want to do anything for you. And then it fades back up, and we hear the dog talking still, and he's like, oh geez. And he's like, oh yeah, you full? You had enough to eat? And he's like, yeah. And like, oh, we'll keep the rest for later. And they walk off into the sunset together, and the dialogue makes it very clear that she served a purpose.
She had great taste. It is so dark.
He killed and cooked Quilla, and they ate her
to keep the dog alive.
Yeah. It's kind of wonderful. I will say my favorite thing about this movie is the ending. It's the darkest shit ending is my favorite part of this movie.
Yeah, this movie definitely won me over.
It's you know, it's definitely flawed, and like I think its messaging is because I think the first time I watched it, I kept waiting for it to kind of click for me, and I thought it was like, okay, he's getting his comeuppance, and like, okay, that's where we're going with this, and he's learning his lesson. But then like by the end, it's like, no. Like, everyone's just awful.
Yeah, I mean, at least if like, okay, he's bad, but the people we meet are worse, and that's sort of true. But like, he did murder a woman, and he rapes a lot, and he's a cannibal, and
yeah, like there's very little redeeming.
Bad.
There's very little redeeming about him. All the dog for that matter.
And he's only 18.
Yeah, It's such a. But what the movie does have is it does have a lot of absurd moments and ideas and visuals. I do think the first half is a bit slow paced, given how much plot it actually has. In the first half, there's very little going on. The first half does, kind of linger
Once
a
they
bit.
get into the underground, that's where things like really pick up. I really like the set design too of everything in the underground.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The second half is much stronger. That's where a lot of its wacky idea. Because as soon as you see these people in this makeup, it's like, well, this is weird. Like, everything about it just has this kind of surreal quality to it.
It's a little midsummery. It's like, ooh, things are kind of culty and
Yeah, because this is the sort of thing where a lot of stories would treat this like a gritty thing, where like, okay, I mean, and this is not to say that's a bad idea, but like you think of Mad Max, and you think of all these people like and like thrown together like armor and leather and stuff, and like everything's kind of grimy, or even like Terminator Future scenes where Kyle's walking through the base camp, and it's just this like
everything's dirty.
Yeah. It was in a war zone, whereas this, no, it's a tranquil little underground civilization that is kind of creepy.
It's sort of holding on to the society that they remember from before any of the wars, like a farmland hoedown style of living in America, Middle America, but it's there's something very, very off.
It's a very specific era they're going for. They really want that pre-war kind of feeling.
I suppose it's not too dissimilar from the Fallout universe. Although I haven't played any of the games, but that's also very much like a 50s style future.
Yeah, it's kind of weird though because they still have robots and stuff, so it's got like a sort of retro future kind of thing going. But yeah, it's there. Definitely.
We know there's at least one robot in this one.
That's true. Yeah, there's a robot. You're right.
Mike the robot.
Mike the robot, who apparently got taken to hospital after shooting that scene because.
The actor did?
Yeah, the actor. Yeah, because of the effect in his back of it sparking was not as safe as it could have been.
Oh no!
So they took him to the hospital right after. I think it was fine. It wasn't like it ended up not being that serious, but like.
Did you get some burns or something?
I would assume so, yeah. So it's I would say this is a movie definitely worth watching if you're into science fiction and you want to like go back and like try out all different kinds, because it's such a unique little. It's not that it's that. It's not that it's even great or that good. But it's a very interesting, curious oddity of a movie that I think, and it's only 90 minutes. As much as I said, the first half does slack a little bit. Like it is only 90 minutes. It's not a long commitment, and it's got enough weird and interesting visuals and ideas going on in it that you can't kind of like help but like go, huh? What?
Yeah, and even though we've spoiled it for you guys, it's worth watching just for the reactions from the lines.
Oh yeah,
some of the lines in it are just so. Oh, yeah. This is dark.
Yeah, the way he says things, the way he talks about women is just absolutely like shocking as you're watching, especially the first time.
Yeah,
because this is a movie where the main character's goal, his main purpose, his motivation for the movie is to find a woman so he can rape her. That is the motivation of the main character of the movie. That is our
MacGuffin. I'm just kidding.
I mean, if anything, the woman's the MacGuffin.
Yes, you're right.
MacGuffin's, I mean, in the context of this movie, the woman is essentially an object, and the MacGuffin's an object that drives the plot. Just for what it's what MacGuffin is. So, like, in Avengers, it's the cube, the cosmic cube.
What do you think of the title of this movie? Because the short story is called something else.
I like the title. I
think it's incredibly misleading.
I mean, it kind of is, but I kind of like the irony of it. Like, as literally a boy and his dog, but it's not like, because you hear that tale, you think, oh, it's a heartwarming story. It's going to be like Homeward Bound or something. It's going to be this Marley and Me.
Like Call of the Wild or something starring a young Kurt Russell in it for the Disney. Nope, that's not it. I'm sure, like, if the MPAA was trying to give it like a G rating or a PG rating, they must have been going off the title alone.
Either that or they went to the bathroom at least during a couple of key sequences.
Through all the murder, all the rape, all the nudity.
Yeah, they had a weak bladder that day. Or maybe the sound wasn't working. So they went to
the
bath.
bush alone must give it at least a PG-13.
And there was talk for a lot apparently about a sequel called A Girl and Her Dog, which was going to be the same dog. It was, the idea was that Vic would die between stories, and this like sort of, so the whole idea would be like showing this world from a female perspective.
The dog can smell out wiener, or
I feel like she'd probably want something different. Apparently,
I'm sure she is fine.
Yeah. That'd be funny though. If it literally was just that though. It's like, yes, I can smell it wiener. Yes.
They're everywhere.
This is true. Especially from what we see in this movie. They're definitely...
It's sausage fest.
Yeah, it's a sausage fest. So I guess we'll rate A Boy and His Dog, Tara, if you would like to.
Yeah, I had a hard time in the beginning with the movie just because it was so gross, just from the way they were talking and like the world that they were building. But it really wins me over once they go underground, and it is like once you accept this world and the rules that is established for the world, and just that everybody is bad and just kind of go along for the ride. It's actually a pretty decent film, and it definitely inspired a lot of greater movies. And I'll always be grateful to it for that. So I think, I know I've been doing a lot of these, but I think it's also a 7. It's a 7.
7?
Yeah, these 70s movies have been getting a lot of 7s for me.
Yeah, and I guess it fits because it's the 70s, and
yeah, I'll give it 7.0.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we're doing a 70s sci-fi month, we're going to get to at least 1 or 2 biggies that are going to get more than a 7.
That's true. I mean, Alien is technically 70s. Yes. Clockwork Orange is 70s.
Yes. So if we do end up doing those to wrap into the 70s theme, when we put all these up, there'll be a couple with higher ratings.
Probably.
Because naturally it has to have. And I'm going to go just a touch lower. I am going to go with a 6.5. I think it's a very interesting film that I do recommend people see. I think there's enough in it to merit a viewing, and even watching it again, there was enough here that I was like, wow, okay. I love that something as weird as this exists and can be found. But I mean, I can't root for anyone, and it's really hard to. It takes a special kind of movie to give me a story and characters that I can't root for, but still somehow like connect to it. So I think I would say that, I find a hard time emotionally connecting to this. Whereas, when it comes to something like, say, I don't know, the Maniac remake, right, where you're POV of the killer the whole time, like, I don't root for him and I'm not sympathizing with him, but like, I almost like that movie kind of shows you the perverse kind of like adrenaline and the rush of the hunt, right? So you kind of like almost go into his shoes in that way, where you kind of like feel the actual progression of what he's doing. Whereas in this, I don't necessarily like even find myself in the shoes of the main character. I don't feel like I'm.
There's zero empathy here.
Yeah, there's no empathy. There you go. That's a good word for it. There's no empathy. So, 6.5. 6.5. I'll say it's
okay.
Worth watching, but not quite good. That's my my final thoughts. But that is A Boy and His Dog. You can, of course, let us know what you think of this movie in the comments below. You can like and subscribe, all that stuff. Get us on the Twitters at the Ace Podcast or at mailed_fuzz if you want channel updates and various other things. We mentioned Patreon earlier, of course, patreon.com/mailfuzztv, so you can go there if you want to support us financially. You can also support us by rating the podcast on Apple Podcasts, give us 5 stars, or of course share us out on social media, all that kind of thing. Tell your friends about us. Tell them about how this great mediocre science fiction podcast. All right, yeah, but that is us. Thank you once again for watching or listening. Tara, would you like to promote any other content that's on MailFuzz TV?
I don't know when this video is going out, but Star Trek was mentioned. You and Connor are doing the Star Trek shows. You're in Next Generation season 5 by now, And you and I have recorded all of Star Trek Picard, the greatest series of all time. I'm sure of it. And you can check out those reviews.
It's worth mentioning at the time of recording, we've only seen one episode of Picard, so Tara's making a pretty bold claim there. Also, I'm not sure if she was
going with my claims.
Yes, I'm not sure if she was joking when she said we'd be in the middle of season 5 of Next Gen, or if she actually just got the number wrong and meant season 3. But regardless, yes, that's the thing that's happening. But that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching the science fiction movies, guys. And computer, that's Elsa.
Rough.